For years, I swore by intermittent fasting. I loved how simple it was. I loved how it made me feel. But then I realized that it wasn't serving me anymore, especially as an athlete and as a woman. Welcome back to the Healthy Not Complicated podcast. If it's your first time tuning in, my name's Kait. I'm a nutritionist. I specialize in insulin resistance, blood sugar control, and sustainable weight loss. My approach is to focus on small, sustainable habits. We're not about crash diets over here, and we're not about overcomplicating things, as the name of this podcast says. Because getting healthy really doesn't have to be complicated. Although, if you were to go anywhere online, it seems like it does. So today I wanted to share a little bit of my story, my experience with intermittent fasting, because don't get me wrong, as a nutritionist and as someone who works with people who have insulin resistance and blood sugar issues, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, PCOS, intermittent fasting can be an extremely helpful and effective tool. And it is very easy. Easy in the sense that it's simple, I guess. It's not always as easy to stick to. But for me personally, and this goes with everything when it comes to health, you need to figure out what works for you and what's actually serving you. Because online, a lot of people have black and white takes. You really need to be 100% for or against something. That's what drives engagement, that's what gets clicks, and that's why everyone seems to have such a hard stance on everything. But the reality is, there is nuance. Not everyone is the same. Yes, we are technically all humans, and there are certain things that do apply to most people, but there's always outliers. Intermittent fasting tends to go hand in hand with low carb diets, with keto diets, because the benefits are very similar. The benefits you get from fasting are mimicked when you reduce carbs in your diet. And the big benefit, that is what a lot of the other benefits stem from, is improved insulin sensitivity. Because your insulin sensitivity improves when your insulin is low. Now, whenever you eat, no matter what you eat, your insulin is going to go up to some degree. When you're eating foods that are high in carbohydrates and sugar, it's going to go up the most. When you eat protein, it'll go up a little bit. And when you eat fat, just a very, very minimal amount. But still, it does go up no matter what you're eating. And the times that your insulin is going to be lowest is when you're not eating. And when you're intermittent fasting and you're extending the time during the day that you're not eating, that means your insulin is going to be lower. And that's why intermittent fasting is so beneficial for insulin sensitivity and reversing insulin resistance, for balancing your blood sugar, for bringing down your fasting blood sugar and reversing prediabetes and even type 2 diabetes.
Before we dive into the next point, let's talk about the perfect gifting solution for yourself or a loved one. Ana Luisa jewelry. I'm wearing two of my absolute favorites today, this delicate heart necklace and this simple, gorgeous mini station necklace. I love stacking them. They layer beautifully. What I truly appreciate about Ana Luisa is their commitment to timeless jewelry and sustainable quality. Their pieces start at just $39, and every piece is backed by a 2-year warranty, so you know you're getting exceptional quality without the shocking price tag. Ana Luisa's holiday sale is officially live. You can save up to 25% off site-wide for a short time only. It's the perfect moment to shop for yourself or to grab a meaningful gift. If you've had your eye on Ana Luisa, this is your sign. To shop all of my favorite pieces and get this amazing limited time deal, click my link in the description box down below. I've had some of my Ana Luisa pieces for years. Trust me, they last, and they make the perfect holiday gift.
Intermittent fasting also helps you to become more metabolically flexible. It teaches your body to burn fat more efficiently. Of course, one of the benefits of this is fat loss. Another benefit is increased autophagy, which comes with a lot of benefits related to longevity, to skin health, to aging. Intermittent fasting is also great for your digestive system because it gives your body a bit of a break. If you're not eating all day long, then your digestion can have a bit of time off. It doesn't have to be working overtime or around the clock. Intermittent fasting improves your sleep because you do sleep better when you've already digested your food and you don't have to digest it into the time you're sleeping. It's helpful for weight loss for a lot of people because it is simple to follow. If you're following a strict fasting schedule, let's say 16-8 or even 12-12, it's pretty easy in the sense that you don't have to, well, you have like hard rules, hard times when you start and stop eating. And if you can stick to that, then it is pretty simple and it can be very effective for weight loss. And a lot of people who are just starting their journey to lose weight, to improve their insulin sensitivity, to balance their blood sugar, they do feel really good right off the bat when they start intermittent fasting, when they start giving their digestive system a break throughout the day, when they start allowing their insulin to come down for longer periods of time. Just because most people are so used to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where we're eating all day long, where we're constantly snacking, where we eat first thing in the morning, where we eat late at night. So by breaking this up a little bit, by spending more time in a fasted state, we feel really, really good. But there are certain people that intermittent fasting works better for, and people who it doesn't work as well for. So the big one is, if you have a lot of weight to lose, then you are going to be someone who benefits a lot from intermittent fasting, just because you have all that stored energy as body fat, which your body can use when you're in a fasted state. Now, as you get closer to your goal weight, it might become a little bit hard to stick to your fasting schedule, but we'll get to that a little bit later. The other group of people who intermittent fasting works a lot better for is men. Women respond completely differently, and it really isn't fair, but it's the truth. As women who haven't went through menopause yet, we go through a hormonal cycle each week. There are times during the month where certain hormones are higher and certain hormones are lower, and this impacts so many things, including our metabolism. For men, they go through a hormonal cycle every single day, but that just means that day to day throughout the month, they feel more or less the same. Whereas as women, we don't. In general, men also have higher metabolic flexibility. They are able to switch between burning glucose for energy and burning fat for energy more efficiently. Men can also survive on a lower body fat percentage. As women, we require more body fat in order for our hormones to work properly. And men respond better to a reduction in calories than women do. If we restrict calories too much for too long, we experience some huge hormonal issues. As women, our bodies have more sensitive reproductive and thyroid signaling. This means that our reproductive system, that our thyroid can be impacted in a negative way from smaller tweaks that might not make any difference to a man's body. We are also more sensitive to cortisol and to chronically high cortisol. Men can get away with stressing their bodies out more and not suffering the negative side effects that we unfortunately have to go through. And this is why you might see a lot of people talking online about how intermittent fasting, how fasting isn't good for women. That isn't necessarily the case. There is a problem, and this is where women run into issues when we overfast. And the issue isn't the fasting itself, but it's not eating enough during our feeding window, which can happen as a result of trying to stick to a strict intermittent fasting schedule. Because when calories drop too low for an extended period of time, our bodies realize that. And they realize that we're not getting the energy we need to function. One of the things we're going to shut down is our reproductive system. And that's why women will experience an irregular cycle. That's why they might have heavier periods. That's why they might miss periods, that sort of thing. This is not due to fasting. The fasting itself isn't the issue. It's the under eating over an extended period of time. But unfortunately, intermittent fasting and calorie restriction tend to go hand in hand. They aren't the same thing, but sometimes they can blend together. Restricting calories can also lower our thyroid output, and obviously this is going to impair our thyroid function. It can increase cortisol. It can also disrupt our hunger signals, so ghrelin and leptin. And it can also reduce our strength and performance if we're working out. So on paper, as women, fasting, totally fine. Now there is some variation when it comes to doing an extended fast, so 24 hours or longer. And by that I mean there are certain times during your cycle where your body responds better to doing an extended fast. And by that I mean the first half of your cycle during your follicular phase. This is when your insulin sensitivity is highest. This is when you're going to be feeling your best. During your second half of your cycle, there are some other things going on which you can't help, but it just means that extended fasting during this time might do more harm than good. Like I said at the start of this video, this isn't fair at all because men don't have to go through this, but it is the reality and it is something we have to consider. All of this is to say, and I guess I'll get a bit more into my experience in a moment, but if you are someone who's been sticking to a strict intermittent fasting schedule because you've been told it's what you need to do to lose weight, to reverse insulin resistance, to reverse diabetes, yes, it can be helpful. and it can help with all of those things, but it's not the only way. And if you are feeling miserable doing it, if you are losing hair, if your menstrual cycle has become irregular, if you are experiencing other side effects regarding your hormone, that sort of thing, then it's not serving you. And it might be time to adjust. Now, that doesn't mean you have to stop intermittent fasting entirely. It might mean shifting your fasting window so you eat earlier in the day and you stop eating earlier in the evening. It might mean not being so rigid with your fasting schedule, being a little bit more flexible, doing 12 hours some days, 16 hours another day, that sort of thing. But what I'm trying to get at is you need to be listening to your body and not listening to people online who are telling you they have the exact framework that you need to use and it's this or nothing else. This is the only way to do things. And on the other side of the spectrum, there's the people who are saying that all fasting is bad for women, that we need to eat right away in the morning. That's also not true, or at least not true for everyone. Like I said, if you're someone who has a lot of weight to lose, then you can, quote, get away with fasting for longer periods of time. Because there are pros and cons here, and you need to weigh those. If you are very overweight, if you're obese, and that is impacting your health in other ways, then the downsides of that are going to be stronger and more apparent than the downsides of sticking to a strict intermittent fasting schedule. So again, a lot of nuance here. And if you're not sure if your fasting has become over fasting, if you're not sure if it has turned into calorie restriction, check in with yourself. Are you progressing towards your goals? What are your goals? Do you have a specific weight loss goal in mind? Do you have a certain target you're aiming for with your blood sugar? Are you progressing towards these goals? If you are, then keep doing what you're doing. If you're not, or maybe you are, but you're feeling absolutely miserable and this is something that you're not going to be able to stick to long term, then it's time to adjust. If you feel cold all the time, if you have poor recovery, if you get irritated really easily, if your sleep is off, if your cycle's off, if you're not getting stronger in the gym and you're sticking to the gym consistently, if you're constantly hungry, and if your weight loss is stalled, these are all signs that you're over fasting. Now, I've mentioned quite a bit, and I guess this episode is going to be a little bit more helpful for women than men, because like I said, they don't have it as hard as we do. For them, it really is about discipline and sticking to something, and they can be a little bit stricter and push their bodies a little bit harder and not suffer those negative effects when it comes to their hormones. We have to be a little bit kinder to ourselves. But just a reminder, the goal isn't to fast longer and longer. Longer fasts aren't always better. OMAD isn't the gold standard. I find that for most people, eating 2 to 3 meals per day, getting enough protein at those meals, getting enough healthy fat, and then being smart about carbs, this is the sweet spot. This is the place where people are spending some time during the day in a fasted state and some time in a fed state where they're getting enough protein and nutrients to fuel their bodies. But it's easy enough that they can maintain it long term. And ultimately, that's what we want to be doing. We don't want to be treating this as a crash diet. We don't want to be trying to just lose the weight and then go back to the way we were eating beforehand. Because if that's our goal, what's the point? We know that if we go back to eating the way we were eating beforehand, we're just going to end up in the same place we were before. We're going to gain the weight back. Our insulin resistance is going to come back. Our blood sugar is slowly going to increase. A lot of people will say that insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, you can't reverse them. You can only manage them. That's not true. But the confusion is that people expect that once they reverse these conditions, they can go crazy. They can eat all the sugar, all the carbs, and still keep it reversed. Obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, if you go back to eating and the lifestyle that you were doing beforehand that got you insulin resistant in the first place, that caused you to gain weight, you're just going to end up in the same place. That doesn't mean you didn't reverse it, because you absolutely can improve your insulin sensitivity. And when you do this, you are able to tolerate carbohydrates better. You do have better metabolic flexibility, but you can't completely go back to the lifestyle that got you there in the first place. So your goal should be to eat in a way that's allowing you to progress towards your goals, that's giving you all the nutrients your body needs, but that's easy to maintain so that you can stick to it long term. And that doesn't mean being perfect. If you aim for perfection, you're going to fail. And now we're gonna take a quick break for my new segment, The Sip with Sodii, where I remind you to stay hydrated and answer one of your questions from the last episode. Today's question is about fasting glucose. And because I chose your question, Sodii is gonna send you 1 pack of their everyday hydration salts. If you want a chance to win next episode, leave a question in the comments down below with the hashtag #TheSipWithSodii. Today's question is, why does my doctor care so much about my fasting and morning glucose? Is it a true marker of health? Short answer, yes. Your fasting glucose, your morning glucose, they are important. They do tell you a lot. Depending on how high your fasting blood sugar is, will tell you how insulin resistant or sensitive you are. Anything above 100 milligrams per deciliter signals you are either pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic. But even if you have a normal fasting blood sugar, this doesn't mean that you don't have insulin resistance. And this is what I talk about all the time. Yes, fasting blood sugar, HbA1c, these are important markers for health, but they miss early insulin resistance. Because before your fasting blood sugar starts to go up, your insulin is gonna be high. When insulin resistance is building, your cells stop responding to insulin correctly. They don't take in glucose as they should. So your glucose is sitting in your bloodstream, and to compensate, your body releases more insulin. Now, for a period of time, this can be months, this can be years, this can be up to 10, 15 years even. This excess insulin is enough to keep your fasting blood sugar in check. So what we end up with is a high insulin level, but a normal fasting blood sugar. And this is why looking at fasting glucose alone isn't enough. What you want to ask your doctor for is either a fasting insulin test or a HOMA-IR test. And what this does, HOMA-IR, with it, you get your fasting insulin and your fasting glucose, and it basically calculates how much insulin is needed to keep your blood sugar where it is. So in someone who is pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, their insulin's gonna be high and their glucose is gonna be high. For someone who is insulin sensitive, both are gonna be low. But for someone who's in the early stages of insulin resistance, their insulin will be high, but their blood sugar will be normal. So this means it is taking a lot of insulin to keep your blood sugar in check. So yes, fasting glucose is important. Your doctor is right to emphasize that. But if you haven't had your fasting insulin tested, then you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. I hope that helped you to understand why fasting glucose is important. I hope that answered your question. Congratulations for being selected this week and winning a pack of everyday hydration salts from Sodii. And thank you again to Sodii for sponsoring this segment. Remember to comment down below with the sip for Sodii if you want your question answered next time. Now let's get back to the episode. Now I wanted to talk about why I personally stopped fasting when I realized that it wasn't serving me anymore. For a long time, 4 years, I was training fasted all of the time. I was going on long distance bike rides. I was going to the gym and doing strength training and doing this all fasted. And honestly, at the time, I felt all right. But then my training style and my goals changed. I got back into ice hockey, which relies mainly on glucose as a fuel source. You need quick energy, as opposed to when I was doing cycling and could be more reliant on fat for fuel. And I started wanting to build a little bit more strength. Because when I was intermittent fasting, when I was doing a lot of cycling, I was losing muscle. I probably wasn't eating enough protein at the time. But on top of that, I was burning too much energy. I wasn't eating enough in general, and intermittent fasting wasn't helping that. And even when I started changing my training style and doing a bit more strength training, I was still doing it fasted in the beginning. And then I realized that having a few carbs targeted around my workout actually improved my performance. And I know the keto police, the carnivore police are gonna come after me every time I talk about using carbs for performance and how they can be beneficial, how they are a quick energy source, and depending on the sport you're doing, the activity you're doing, they can be beneficial. I have people in my comments being like, look at this guy, he does this sport, he doesn't eat any carbs, you don't need carbs, your body can make them. Look, like I said, everyone is all or nothing online, and that's not helpful. Because look, I tried to play hockey and train eating a low carb diet, and let me tell you, I felt weak. I didn't have the energy I needed to fuel my sessions, to get me through a game. Adding carbs in strategically was an absolute game changer. But look, this is my situation, and like I said, my goals are different than probably a lot of yours. Everyone's goals are different. If your goal is weight loss, if your goal is improving your insulin sensitivity, then yes, reducing carbs, Doing fasted workouts occasionally can be beneficial, but there's nuance. How much weight do you have to lose? Are you a man? Are you a woman? Are you an athlete? What's your insulin sensitivity? All of these things are important. Fasting can be so beneficial, but it's a tool. It doesn't have to become your identity. Now my approach is to fuel for performance. Do I fast sometimes? Yeah. If I wake up in the morning, I have a rest day, I'm not doing anything, I might go a little bit longer without eating. I do still always try to stop eating at least 3 hours before bed, so I am getting a little bit more fasting in on that end of things, but I'm not super strict about it. With my hockey schedule now, we usually play late afternoon on Saturdays and then again Sunday morning. So post game, I need to eat, or I'm not going to be able to recover for the next day. But this is my experience. Yours could be totally different. Really, the point I'm getting at is we need to do what works for us. We don't need to put ourselves in these rigid boxes. We don't need to have this all or nothing mindset. The reason so many people push it online is because that is what gets clicks. That's what gets comments. If you're polarizing, you're going to get more engagement. You're going to get more reach. That's why these videos, these posts, they show up on your social media feed, because they are extreme, but they're not based in reality. Okay, I better wrap this up before I get too heated. Really what I'm trying to say, fasting is a tool, but you need to figure out what works for you. I do think that everyone out there can benefit from spending a bit more time in a fasted state every day, but don't overdo it. It shouldn't feel difficult. Maybe a little bit difficult at the start, but nothing crazy. It shouldn't feel like torture. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comments down below what your intermittent fasting schedule is. Has it changed over the years? Has it changed as your goals have evolved? Let me know down below. I'm very curious to hear from you guys. And remember, if you have a question that you would like answered in the next episode, make sure to leave it down below with the hashtag #TheSipWithSodii. You can leave it either in the Spotify comments or on the comments on YouTube. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.